Would you believe me if I told you that the length of the winning spelling bee word at the Scripps National Spelling Bee could predict the number of people killed by venomous spiders in the United States every year? Or that changes in the divorce rate in the state of Maine were a predictor of the per capita level of margarine consumption in the United States? Or that higher levels of chicken consumption led to more U.S. crude oil exports? After all, I've got data to back up all these points. But these are all examples of spurious correlations, a relationship between two variables like divorce in Maine and margarine consumption that appears to be causally linked but in reality is either just coincidence or connected through a hidden or confounding variable. And they highlight the aphorism popularized by the American satirist Mark Twain, but more likely traced to former British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, that there are three kinds of lies: damned lies, and statistics. Or to quote the British economist Ronald Coase, if you torture the data long enough, you can make it confess to anything. And so in this video, we're going to explore how this plays out in the context of US politics. The concept of public opinion polling can be traced back to ancient times, but the systemic effort to gauge public opinion started much later. In the early 19th century, newspapers began conducting straw polls, which were unscientific surveys used to predict election outcomes or gauge public sentiment on various issues. These straw polls essentially asked newspaper readers to send in their opinions on an issue or question, but they didn't employ random sampling methods used by pollsters today. As a result, their findings did not accurately reflect the broader population. By the 1930s, modern public opinion polling began to take shape. Pollsters like George Gallup and Elmo pioneered scientific polling techniques in the United States, introducing random sampling methods that allowed for small, representative samples of the population to accurately reflect the opinions of the larger population. This method proved its worth in the 1936 U.S. presidential election, when George Gallup accurately predicted Franklin D. Roosevelt's landslide victory, contrary to the predictions of the Literary Digest's straw poll. In the post-World War II era, the use of public opinion polling expanded and became more sophisticated with improvements in sampling techniques, questionnaire design, and data analysis. By the late 20th century, the ubiquity of telephones made telephone surveys the primary method for conducting polls. This period saw a rise in computer-assisted telephone interviewing, improving efficiency and data accuracy. But the decline in landline use and the rise of mobile phones and the internet in recent years poses challenges to traditional polling methods. In response, polling has increasingly incorporated online methods including web-based surveys and data analytic techniques that analyze large data sets or big data from various sources. There's also a growing use of mixed method approaches that combine various methods to reach broader demographics. Indeed, a wide variety of polling methods are used today, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. There are a variety of surveys and polls conducted through a variety of mediums, including telephone, through online surveys, face-to-face interviews, and so on. In general, such polls can be very accurate, especially when sample sizes reach 1,500 to 2,000 people. Assuming that sample is properly selected, the sample will generally be representative of the opinions held by the population as a whole. Random sampling helps ensure that this is the case. A random sample simply means that each person within the population has an equal chance of being chosen. Pollsters will often use stratified random sampling methods when they're interested in understanding the distribution of viewpoints across a population. In stratified random sampling, the population is divided into subgroups or strata based on shared characteristics, and then random samples are taken from each stratum. If a pollster wants to understand how Republicans and Democrats viewed an issue differently, or how religion or educational background affects various political viewpoints, they'd use random stratified sampling to do so. Regardless of how well the sample may be chosen or how well the survey may be designed, all polls contain a sampling error. This is the plus or minus 5 percentage points you often hear when polling data is reported. In general, the larger the sample size, the smaller the sampling error. In recent years, polling averages have become increasingly popular. Essentially, polling averages do exactly what the name suggests. They average a variety of polls together to get a sense of public opinion. In doing so, they generally develop a more accurate picture of public sentiment. But on the negative side, some political campaigns use push polls, which are essentially fake polls that, rather than being designed to actually measure public opinion, are really intended to push voters towards one side or another. Beyond surveys and polls, several other polling techniques are briefly worth mentioning. Exit polls are polls conducted outside of voting locations on election day. They ask voters who they voted for and why, providing immediate feedback about the elections and voter attitudes. Exit polls are often used to ground test pre-election polling data and are one of the primary sources used that permit news media and political analysts to call an election before the final votes are tabulated. Essentially, the analysts are looking at the exit poll data results to get a sense of trends and patterns in voting behavior and are using that data to correlate with official results as they come in, with historical voting data, and with the expected margin of remaining votes to make a prediction about the election's result. When all the data line up, and especially when the election is not particularly close or when it's conducted in a district with a strong partisan lean, they're often able to call elections with just a small proportion of the votes actually tabulated. Focus groups are small groups of people brought together to discuss specific topics. They're useful for getting detailed opinions and understandings of the reasons behind those opinions, but they don't generally provide quantifiable data representative of the larger population. Nevertheless, we often see focus groups used by the media to discuss debate performance by presidential candidates in each election cycle. Tracking polls are continuous surveys that track public opinion over a period, useful in observing how opinion changes in response to events or over the course of an election campaign. Deliberative polling combines features of surveys and focus groups. It begins by polling a random representative sample of people on an issue. Respondents are then given detailed information about the issue and engage in following discussion, followed by another poll to see how opinions have changed. And finally, social media analysis is increasingly used to provide real-time insights into public opinion, especially on current events and emerging issues. Essentially, this approach analyzes trends, opinions, and discussions on social media platforms. But while social media analysis offers interesting insights, it may not be representative due to self-selection bias. Regardless of the method employed, measuring public opinion accurately is a complex task that faces a variety of challenges. First, the mode of a survey, that is, the method used to conduct the survey, online, telephone, face-to-face, and so on, can create several challenges that impact the quality and accuracy of the data collected. Telephone surveys, for example, increasingly suffer from challenges of collecting a representative sample, as fewer and fewer people, especially younger people, don't have landlines. As previously mentioned, sampling error, or the error that occurs because the sample of a population might not perfectly be representative of the entire population, can yield survey results that are not actually representative of the public's opinion on an issue. Several different types of response bias can also affect results. Response bias occurs when respondents' answers are systematically different from their true beliefs or behaviors. This can happen for several reasons. Social desirability bias refers to the tendency of respondents to give socially responsible or acceptable answers. For example, a pollster asking the question, "Do you recycle regularly?" might lead respondents to answer yes, even if they really don't, because recycling is seen as a socially responsible behavior. In other words, they tend to over-report positive behaviors and under-report negative behaviors to pollsters. The Bradley effect is a specific type of social desirability bias. Named after Tom Bradley, an African-American who ran for governor of California in 1982, the theory posits that some white voters might tell the pollsters they are undecided or likely to vote for the non-white candidate, but actually vote for the white candidate on election day. The effect is thought to stem from a social desirability bias, where respondents provide answers they believe are more socially acceptable rather than their true feelings, especially on sensitive matters like race. Non-response bias occurs when certain types of individuals are less likely to respond. As we've previously mentioned, telephone surveys tend to undersample younger voters as they're less likely to own a landline or respond to unknown callers. As a result, survey results might inaccurately reflect public opinion on policy. Finally, acquiescence bias results from the tendency people have to agree with statements regardless of their content. This can happen especially if they're unsure about their response, want to please the interviewer, or have a general tendency to avoid confrontation. This results in an over-reporting of agreement, which can distort the survey's findings about respondents' true attitudes or behaviors. The way questions are phrased can significantly influence how respondents interpret and answer them. Leading, loaded, or complex questions can confuse respondents or push them towards a certain answer, resulting in biased or inaccurate responses. This can sometimes be intentional, as in the case of push polls, or it can result from errors in survey design. Finally, the timing of a survey and the context in which it's conducted can affect respondents' answers. Public opinion often fluctuates in response to current events, news stories, or changes in the socio-political climate. Surveys conducted before or after such events might yield vastly different results. But that's it for now. Please leave any questions you have in the comments section below, and thanks for watching.